Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's wealthmanagement.com webinar, Compare and Contrast, a process to help identify what's better enough for you and your clients. This webinar is sponsored by Tiff & Grow. And I like that term, better enough, and we're going to hear more about what that means. My name is David Armstrong. I'm Editor-in-Chief and Executive Director of Content for wealthmanagement.com, and I'll be your host today. And in a moment, I'm going to turn things over to our speakers, but first, just some housekeeping to help you get the most out of this event. Note that you can improve your viewing and listening experience inside the portal by clicking on the upper right-hand corners of the web portal there. You can resize the windows. At the bottom of your screen, you'll find multiple application widgets. Clicking on those icons allows you to open and close those widgets. You will not be removed from the webinar if you do. And note that there is a link to today's presentation in the green resource list widget at the bottom of the screen. Please also note that this webinar has been accepted for one CE credit hour towards the AEP designation program, and the Investments in Wealth Institute has accepted this program for 1 hour of CE credit towards the CIMA, the CPWA, the CIMC, and the RMA certifications. And instructions to get those credits are available in the resource list widget there at the bottom of the screen. Again, instructions for claiming those credits are available in the resource list widget at the bottom of the screen. And note that our speakers, the Diamonds, will welcome any and all questions about the topic today, and they will answer as many as they can following the presentation, but feel free to submit yours to the queue at any time. The way you do that, just open up that Q&A window, type your question into the screen, hit submit, and we will collect all the questions here and get to as many as we can following the presentation. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and it will be available for on-demand viewing following the event today. Before we get started, I do want to introduce Bill Parsons. Bill is the General Manager of Tiff & Grow, and he will share a few comments with you before the presentation. Bill, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you, David. Bill Parsons, as David indicated, General Manager of Tiff & Grow. Tiff & Grow is an investment platform that uses risk planning and financial personality insights to provide a turnkey way for advisors to create personalized investment portfolios and proposals for their clients at scale. That is why I'm pleased to introduce today's webinar, Compare and Contrast, a process to help identify what's better enough for you and your clients. Understanding what matters to clients and addressing their needs in a personalized way is very much aligned with what we're doing here at Tiff & Grow. As you've all probably felt firsthand, changes in firms or models can be disruptive and daunting. So how do you decide what might be better enough to justify the risk and hassle of making a move? Today's webinar is meant to help you figure out how to not get stuck with the status quo and access the efficiencies and growth that can come from adopting change. Our guests will be sharing a process that will help advisors compare and contrast options within their current firm through a proven self-assessment process derived from a more extended appraisal that the Diamonds will go through with their advisor clients. Before we begin, I want to talk a bit more about the importance of making these types of changes. We're all aware that most digital experiences that clients interact with today, whether it be music, ride sharing, movies, online shopping, pretty much everything we do in our digital lives has embraced this notion of hyper-personalization. So here at Tiffin, we asked ourselves, why not bring that to wealth management? Why not have the same personalized experience for clients and their investments? So according to the World Wealth Report, a staggering 60% of high net worth clients today report an unsatisfactory experience with their advisory firm's personalized information and services. Now that means the best clients are not getting personalized service to the level they expect out in the public market. So despite the barriers to making changes to a tech stack, there's a certain level of urgency rising within our industry to adopt personalization strategies. At Tiff & Grow, we seek to solve for that using the latest AI technology to make it easy for you to start personalizing investments at scale. No matter the size of your practice, our platform aims to improve outcomes for helping advisors not only intelligently prioritize their prospects, but to get the information they need to personalize investments through risk, planning, and financial personality modules. All this can be done in a matter of minutes. When you're ready to act on that data, our platform helps you to create investment proposals and even manage your ongoing investment management through sub-advised trading. So quite a robust set of capabilities. Once you take the time to make the switch, we think the results are well worth it. Better conversion potential, greater efficiency, more satisfied clients, and increased chance of referrals. If you want to learn more, please go to tiffinwealth.com You'll see all of our propositions are contained in there. I represent the growth solution, again, risk planning and personality, but you'll also see what we're doing around marketing, giving, query, and research. So a tremendous amount of content out available on tiffinwealth.com. We power over 3,000 advisors today, so our solutions are proven and robust in the market. And thanks so much for joining. And I look forward to hearing what the Diamonds have to say. And David, I'll turn it back to you. Thanks so much for the time today.
Thanks very much, Bill. Thanks very much. And thanks for Tiffin for their support. I want to introduce you to today's speakers now. We have Louis Diamond. Louis is the president of Diamond Consultants. And in this role, he's guided many of the top teams in the industry as they've transitioned to another employee model firm or launched their own RA firms. And joining Louis is Mindy Diamond. Mindy is the CEO of Diamond Consultants. She started Diamond Consultants in 1998 and is considered by the industry as one of the top thought leaders, regularly quoted in national media outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNBC, and of course a monthly column in wealthmanagement.com. And you can find out more information about both Diamonds by clicking on the speaker bio widget at the bottom of the screen. With that, Louis, Mindy, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, David, so much for having us. I will kick this off. And first of all, thank our audience, whoever has joined, for taking the time out of your busy day to be with us. And whether you've participated in the first part of this series or today's, we're grateful that you're here. So let me just recap for a moment. In part one of this two-part series, we talked about the change in advisor sentiment and how those changes have really driven enormous advisor movement. Advisor sentiment has changed because what advisors want more than anything and will seek is greater freedom, flexibility, and control. We walked through the waterfall of options in this much expanded industry landscape that includes options that never existed before. And we outlined the different models that quality advisors can run their practices in. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of running a strategic and thoughtful due diligence process. Most advisors, many advisors, wind up coming to us because they've approached it in a haphazard way. We're going to talk about a thoughtful and strategic way to go about it so that if you're an advisor considering change, we're going to talk about the importance of slowing down to speed up, to gain clarity around your goals, what it takes to run your business, and what you want your end game to look like. And the clearer you can be about that, the more likely you are to land in the right place. It's a very strong seller's market today, which means that quality advisors have a world of options to consider and strong, in fact, unprecedented recruiting packages to incent them. And so while increased optionality is a good thing for everyone concerned, for the advisor, for their families, for their clients, for their teams, it can make the discovery process somewhat overwhelming. So if you don't have clarity around what you're looking to solve for, you could look at 1,000 options and never know if you found the right one. So the goal for today is to share our process for strategic due diligence, how to assess the options and compare and contrast, what are the right questions to ask, how to be sure all stakeholders are on the same page, and ultimately to help you determine if one or a number of options are better enough than the status quo. And we will define what we mean by better enough as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Louis to kick it off.
Perfect. So thank you, everyone, for allowing me to spearhead this along with Mindy and the folks from Tiffin. So the real focus of today's session is we call it a self-assessment. Assessment sounds like a homework assignment. Some look at it like that, but really it's the most important foundational exercise that either a single advisor, a business owner, a team of advisors, or even a loose confederation of affiliated folks can undertake. In our view, if you don't start with an assessment, you're missing the boat. Doesn't mean you have to start with ours, but to Mindy's point earlier, slowing down to speed up is the name of the game. Advisors who kind of just jump into the process, they take the first call from the recruiter who calls, or they follow what a friend did, or they read about a firm on wealthmanagement.com, or they know every manager in town. We've heard all of the rationalizations. Sometimes get to a point where they just get overwhelmed. And if you don't first understand what it is you're looking for and what's driving the bus, it's much harder to be strategic. So strategic can also mean efficient. Efficient meaning looking at the right firms that match your own strengths and weaknesses, what's most important to you, what fits your clients' needs, and ultimately to get to a point where you can make an objective decision on whether there is a firm where the grass is greener, or maybe it just makes sense to stay put. So this is the exercise we'll take you through. It's a shorter, more scaled down version than the one we take our advisor clients through. So anyone who'd like to go through a more extensive process is welcome to reach out after we're complete.
Thanks,
Great.
Lewis. Go ahead,
Yeah,
David.
no, that's fine. I was just going to ask, you guys work with a ton of advisors conducting this kind of due diligence process, and I'm just wondering if you have any of the common traits that are most successful. What are some of the most common traits that most of the successful processes have?
Yeah, I'll jump in, and then Lewis might have something to add. So I think that one, they're willing to be thoughtful. It's someone can take a very transactional approach by saying who's paying the biggest deal, or again, as Lewis said, a friend of mine works at Morgan Stanley or UBS, and so I think that's where I should go. The best advisors, or the advisors that wind up really in the right place, are the ones who are committed to being flexible and open, to not presuming they have all the answers or they know everything, to be willing to, again, slow down to speed up. That it can be annoying to force yourself to ask a lot of these questions, but they're really important questions, and you're much more likely to find success if you ask them. Lewis, you probably have stuff to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really looking at the right firms, and that's part of our role, is helping advisors sift through what could be hundreds and hundreds of options to find the options that make the most sense for their business. So it's our belief that an advisor has to invest ample time in the due diligence process, but it doesn't mean that ample time has to be spent interviewing 15, 20, or 30 different firms. It's more important to go deeper on the right subset of options that match your goals. Not every firm you pick is going to be a winner, but at least you can start with a more condensed and more strategic list based upon the answers to the assessment.
Louis, Mindy mentioned something about, these firms often do non-strategic due diligence process, right? It's kind of a haphazard due diligence process. What are some examples of that?
Yeah, so I mentioned some a little bit earlier. Taking the phone call from the first person who reaches out, or my friend went to XYZ firm and they seem happy, why don't I just go there? That's definitely an example. Is kind of a knee-jerk reaction, or being reactive instead of proactive. I think that's the strongest example. Another one, and we've all encountered advisors that do this. Sorry if you're one of the ones on this webinar, but any firms or recruiters that are on definitely know what I'm talking about. The advisor who wants to look at 15 or 20 different firms, and they enjoy kind of being courted. They feel like they have to look at everything in order to find the right thing, and they don't want to have buyer's remorse. That backfires though, because it's near impossible to keep everything straight. And what tends to happen is they spend a bunch of time taking first and second meetings, and then they just can't keep it all straight. And what happens is they may just throw their hands up because they're overwhelmed and stay put, or they'll just go to the last thing they looked at because it's easier. So I think those are some good examples of a non-strategic due diligence process. It happens. Everyone makes decisions differently, but we have a 20-plus year methodology that we'll begin walking through to help drive the process in the most efficient and effective way possible.
Yeah. If I can actually add just one thing to that, you use the term, Lewis, proactive and not reactive. We get a lot of calls from advisors that had a bad day. Their compliance department said no to something they were hoping to do for a client, or they're annoyed or frustrated with their manager, or in some way they just had a bad day. And it's very easy to, or likely, because these advisors, top advisors, are getting calls from outside recruiters like us or from business development folks at every firm all the time. So to react to a bad day and say, sure, I'll take a meeting, only to realize that, in fact, it's really not the right time to move, or they're not really clear of what they might be looking for. So again, we talk a lot of people out of moving simply because it's just not the right thing to do.
For those firms, Mindy, that where it might be the right thing to do, Louis mentioned, the mistake talking to 30 or 40 firms. How many firms do you typically advise a firm look at before making a move?
Yeah, there is no specific number. I mean, nobody needs to talk to 30 or 40 or even 10 or more firms. It's just not necessary. So when we advise folks, most people will take, we think the best way is an a la carte menu approach. They may look, let's say they're not really sure what they want. So we may have them look at one wirehouse, one regional firm, one boutique firm, and one independent option, so that they get a flavor or a sense or an idea of what each option means. But unequivocally, after that first meeting, they should be able to eliminate or zero in on the one or two models that make the most sense. And then we add the appropriate additional firms from each model. Generally speaking, people will look first round of meetings, let's say 4 or 5 firms, and ultimately narrow it down to 3. And then the last step in the process is to do a home office visit with whatever firm. Nobody wants to or should be flying all over the country to meet with 2 or 3 or 4 different firms. So most people then will narrow it down to 1.
But you recommend that they do they look at firms in each of the individual channels that you outlined in the last webinar?
Not always.
Yeah. Okay.
Great question. So sometimes people are 100% clear on what they want. I will never go to another wirehouse. I only want to look at a regional firm. Or I'm entrepreneurial and I only want to build my own firm and be independent. Well, then we're not looking at Morgan Stanley if you know you want to be independent. But many advisors, most advisors, especially as the industry landscape has expanded, don't really have an idea of what exists beyond the 4 walls of their own model. And many advisors will wind up taking that a la carte menu approach, if not with each model, with several of them.
Got it. Louis, you want to talk a little bit about the self-assessment that you guys have created?
Yeah, so I think we'll let the assessment be the star of the show. I think we teed it up pretty well. But just to reiterate, we created this assessment. This is the shorter version, based upon 20 plus years of counseling advisors and teams across the industry. And we've identified these to be, we think, the most important foundational questions that individual advisors should ask themselves. If folks are part of a team or there's multiple stakeholders that have a voice, it's really helpful to have each individual participant complete the assessment themselves and then get together with our facilitation to compare and see where partners may not be on the same page. So getting this part right is really helpful for the rest. So let's jump into the actual assessment. I'll let Mindy take the first couple here, and then I'll jump in for after that.
Yeah. So the first set of questions are really around what's soulful to the advisor. What's your why? Why did you become an advisor in the first place? And what motivates you? Now, you may say, well, why is that important? Because the reason we ask those questions and we begin with that is because, one, it's foundational. It orients the advisor into thinking about what's most important to me. And it's very easy to skip over that. The goal of any exercise, whether it be compare and contrast, stay versus go, whatever it is that the advisor wants to live his or her best business life. And so we start with these questions because it's really reminding advisor what's most important to them. And the clearer they can be on the why and the reasons behind it all, the more likely they are to make good decisions. So let me just take a second and share with you So let's say an advisor says, the reason I do this, that I'm a financial advisor, is because I want to help my clients fulfill their goals. I want to be able to serve them in an unlimited way. I want to be able to really help them to manage their entire financial lives. So let's assume that's the answer. Let's assume that's somebody's answer. The goal of this self-assessment, and you'll see as we walk through it, is to help them take that answer to serve clients in an unlimited way and hold those answers up to a light, to shine a light on the status quo. To what extent, how much does what you're doing now allow you to serve your clients in the most unlimited way? If the answer is fully and completely, well, that's great. Then you recommit to your firm and you stay from a position of greater strength. But very often, what we find in response to this set of questions is that there is a gap between what they want, what their goals are, and where they are.
Mindy, I think we might be getting some interruption in your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
That sounds good. Yep.
Better. Okay. Lewis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. If we can just advance the slide, please. All right. So these next two questions really get into assessing what you have now. I actually think this first question, what do you like most about your firm, is one of the most important ones that an advisor can answer. The goal is the things that an advisor likes, they benefit from, the things that help them, that they're very happy and comfortable paying for in today's environment. That is the bare minimum point of entry for assessing another option. Same thing for what's most essential to replicate. There's never going to be perfection in a move, but our job and that of a team is to make sure there's no harm to the end client and that everything they're doing is about bettering what they can do for clients and bettering what their team is able to do for everyone that's involved. So a common answer or a possible answer about what you like most about your firm, it probably contains items like our technology is very well integrated, or I really enjoy the advanced planning department within the firm, or having a bank is helpful for serving clients, or my branch manager or my OSJ is helpful in blocking and tackling. From what's most essential to replicate, it might be I need a firm with a sterling brand. I don't want to take a step back, and I need a big brand in order to do my best work. Or I really need to be in an office with other like-minded advisors. I don't want to be out on my own. Or I need the best performance reporting software or financial planning tools. So it's very specific to individual advisors, but coming back to it, these answers will help guide the minimum requirements that someone would consider in their process.
Yeah. Lewis, it's probably a good time for us to explain what we mean by the concept of better enough.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That? Yeah, I'm happy to look at it. So anyone who's on this conversation, who's moved before, has thought about moving, or is involved in the ecosystem of recruiting and transitioning advisors, knows that any transition, regardless of the book of business, the firm they're going to, DocuSign or paper or paperwork required, it's going to be a big lift. It's disruptive for clients to oftentimes need new account numbers. They have to sign a bunch of paperwork, relink everything. And then for the team, depending upon where they're coming from, there's risk in clients staying behind. There's risk in the firm they're leaving trying to keep their clients if they're not independent. So something has to be really better enough to justify the pain and hassle of making a change. Most advisors, I would probably guess almost every advisor who engages in a due diligence process will see some things that are better than their current firm. Otherwise, they wouldn't be looking at those firms to begin with. But it's in totality. The advisor has to assess whether everything lined up versus what they have today, is it more than marginally better enough to justify the pain, the hassle, and the risk? So that's what we mean by the concept of better enough.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly right. And so our benchmark, our criteria that we help the advisors we're fortunate enough to counsel is not just, is it better, but is it needle moving enough relative to the hassle and disruption of making a move? So if we can advance the slide, let's look at the next set of questions. So the next set of questions, these two questions really look at what frustrates you. Now, there is no question that I would venture to say that there's not an advisor on the planet that couldn't list at least 3 or 4 things that frustrate them. But that doesn't mean that every advisor on the planet should make a move, should even consider a move, because the next question is what's really important. The next question says, okay, you're frustrated by perhaps too much bureaucracy, heavy-handed compliance, management to the lowest common denominator, not receiving or believing you're not getting enough value relative to what you're paying your broker dealer, not enough practice management support, whatever it may be. But the next question forces you to say, are these things, each of these things that are frustrating you, minor annoyances, or are they move worthy? Are they items that are worthy, that justify the hassle and disruption, not only of making a move, but the due diligence process itself? And usually what happens is if an advisor comes to us with a list of 5 to 10 frustrations, we can knock probably 7 of the 10 off right off the bat, because they're annoying or they're based in today, but they're not really big enough frustrations. They're not global frustrations. So it's important to be clear about the difference between, we usually say on a scale of 1 to 10, to what extent do these frustrations limit you? So what we want to focus on is not looking to create issues where none exist, but we want to help the advisor to really focus on that combination between the non-negotiable drivers, the non-negotiable most important motivators, and the things they're looking to solve for, things that frustrate them. And I'll take 2 seconds just to give you my favorite anecdote. My husband, who is my soulmate, who I have been married to for almost 37 years, leaves the top off of the toothpaste all the time. Does it irritate me? Yes. Is it a minor annoyance? Yes. Sometimes is it even a little more than that? Yes. But is it divorce worthy? Definitely not. Now you may think that's a silly example, but I think it sort of gives you an idea, a colorful way of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to what Mindy said is advisors also have to pick out frustrations that are really going to be the same no matter where they go. So I've seen on someone's assessment before, my clients are overbearing. Well, that's your clients, you pick them. Your clients aren't going to be any easier to deal with, whether you're an RIA, you're at a broker dealer, or you're at UBS. So you also have to pick and choose ones where they're actually going to be, we'll say, firm-specific frustrations. And it's okay if not all of them are, but that's part of what we do, and what the due diligence process does is it helps you check off the list. It's not just what it is you're looking to solve for, but also, okay, are my 7 frustrations alleviated here? And if they are, how much do I think they're fixed? Go to the next slide, please.
Back to the concept of better enough, it's will they be alleviated enough? You could look at another firm and they may help you to move the needle a little bit with respect to an issue, but is it going to be needle moving enough? And that's really the criteria we help the advisory council to use.
Yep. So I'll take the next one. This is a critical question. Do you feel you derive enough value from your firm relative to what you pay for? I think enough is the key word here, because every firm, no matter how unhappy an advisor is adding some value, even if the advisor takes it for granted. They're doing my compliance. There is technology. There's a team I can call if my computer breaks. So it's up to an advisor to determine if everything a firm does for them, the kind of the front stage and the back of stage items, are worth it compared to the cost. And it's not a zero-sum game, because if a firm is providing a resource or capability, you're going to have to likely replace it elsewhere. So you can't just say, well, my broker dealer is taking 12% of my revenue and I have an 8 basis point admin fee. They're not adding enough value. because on the outside, let's say you build your own RIA, there's still a cost for outsourcing compliance, for financial technology, et cetera. We saw this question, I would say, really pop up in prominence as the main, we'll say, driver or thought exercise for advisors and business owners during the pandemic. When we had firms who didn't allow advisors to be in their office space, or whose broker-dealer was very limiting with how to communicate with clients in a rapid, scalable fashion, advisors really sat back and said, wow, I'm paying 55 cents on the dollar for what? For a business card, for a remote login to a computer. And that was one of the main drivers of this incredibly active recruitment market, especially in 2020 and 2021, and still seeing some spillover today. So again, the key word is enough, and every advisor will have a completely different opinion as far as what value they derive. And the value is not static. It will change as an advisor matures into the space. So for example, if you're an advisor at Goldman Sachs, incredible brand, amazing cachet, great training program, and one of the best places for an advisor to cut their teeth. But as an advisor grows their practice, they're now doing 3, 4, 5, 10 million in production. Goldman's taking 65% or more of compensation to access the platform and to be an advisor at the firm. So in that case, an advisor who's LOS 1 to 3 probably says, yeah, Goldman's worth it because I've grown, it gets me into rooms with CEOs. But as the advisor matures into the space, they just don't need the platform or the resources in the same way, or they think they can replicate the best of what a firm does in either a more freeing environment or where there's greener pastures.
So, Louis, let me ask you a follow-up question to that. So that's an example of an advisor that works as a captive employee. But how does this concept of deriving enough value apply to somebody who's independent, say with an independent broker-dealer?
Yeah, really good pivot point. So I think it's almost broker-dealers and RIA platforms advisors join are almost more in the hot seat in the independent space. Because advisors own their data, they can pick up and move. They have to go through the work, but they're not going to have their clients poached. And an advisor is always a free agent for the most part in the independent space. So the value that a broker-dealer derives has to keep evolving. So broker-dealers 10 years ago, their main function was being a broker-dealer. It's really evolved to what it means for a broker-dealer to exist. So now it's not just we process your commission business and do compliance. It has to be more about being a business outsourcing platform and keeping up with the times as advisors become more fee-based. So I think that's a good example. The direct, we'll say, competitor to any broker-dealer is either going to be someone going into the RIA channel, where you can eliminate admin fees and get a higher payout. But of course, it's not perfect because you pick up more work and more responsibilities. The same could be said for a smaller broker-dealer that may not be keeping up with the times when it comes to technology investments and compliance, a flexible compliance culture. And their competition then, it might be a more scaled broker-dealer who's spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on technology enhancements. So I think it really relates to any advisor in any segment of the industry, is just assessing whether you're getting enough value from the firm, and the things that are valuable, what are they? And let's try to replicate it in another environment.
Yeah, well said. I agree. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I like this next one a lot. If you could imagine the perfect firm, what would be its top 3 attributes? Okay, so sometimes advisors will come to us and say, I know the 3 firms I want to look at, or the 2 firms, or the 5 firms I want to look at. But almost always, even if they do, somewhere through the process, we poke holes in it and they begin to see that either their list was incomplete or wasn't entirely right or was rooted in perhaps some of the wrong things. So what we're looking for here is less the name of the firms you're interested in, but more to define a firm or describe a firm or what you want a firm, a broker-dealer, a custodian, whoever supports you to be able to provide. A couple things to bear in mind. One, There is no perfection anywhere. You already know that your current firm or broker dealer or partner firm is not perfect. You don't need us to tell you that. It's a question of whether on par, it's good enough. And again, when you're searching elsewhere, whether or not another firm or model or option you're looking at is better enough. But the goal of this exercise is to, or this question rather, is really to define and be clear on what your non-negotiables are. What are your drivers? Now, here's what happens. In most cases, people have many drivers. I want to be closer to home. I want better technology. I want best investment platform. I want great support. I want more money for T&E. I want great brand. I want transition money, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Number one, it's unlikely, highly unlikely, and I'm at this 25 years and I've never seen anybody get 100% of those things. So it's very important that if there's a list of 10 drivers or 10 attributes or 10 things that are important to you, that you are clear on what the top 3 to 5 are, the non-negotiables. What are the most important things on that list that if a firm, a model, or an option can't offer you, you wouldn't go? It would be a deal breaker or a non-starter. So I want to share something else here that's important to talk about. Very often when we ask this question on the self-assessment, either verbally or in writing, and somebody gives us an answer, very often their top 3 attributes will be in direct conflict with each other. And it's our job to point out that if you're looking for 3 things that don't exist in the same model or in the same firm, you're never going to find the right option. What do I mean by that? Let's assume that when we say, what are the 3 most important things to you? Somebody says, I want to be a business owner. I need top transition deal, and I want brand cachet. Those 3 things are in direct conflict with each other. Being a business owner is either about not maximum transition money, or in the RIA space, often no transition money at all. So generally speaking, the notion of being a business owner and getting top transition money are impossible to find in the same place. And oftentimes, if somebody is interested in being an independent business owner, while it might be nice to have a top brand, and they may be thinking Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, and UBS, in the independent space, top brands can often be the custodians. Schwab, Goldman is entering the space, Pershing, Fidelity, etc. So one of the things that's important here that we help a lot of people look at is, are the 3 attributes or top attributes, are they congruent with each other? Did I miss anything here, Liz?
No, I think that's good. Let's go to the next slide. So this one is where I'd say almost always we find answers that are in direct conflict with one another. If you ask an advisor, any advisor, you ask them, how important is transition money? They'll say, well, it's either essential or it's nice to have. I'm not going to turn it down. That same advisor might say, I also want a 95% payout, and I want to own my book of business, and I want equity in a firm. So obviously everyone wants to maximize all of these items because it's the best way to maximize your career enterprise value, which is the summation of these four categories, but something has to give. So for example, an advisor who's independent at a broker dealer, they may say a transition deal is very important. Okay, great. We will look for something that matches that. But at the same time, they also want the highest payout. Oftentimes, highest transition deal is in direct conflict with the highest payout. So our job would be to try to find something that's probably a middle ground between both. You also see it with partners who one may say top transition deal, another one may say they want to own their book of business and build for the long term. So I think this one's important because it's a really good screening question for us where we can eliminate certain options that financially aren't going to make sense. Let's go to the next question. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time.
Okay, so this one's important. The industry has really, the wealth management industry has really encouraged partnering or teaming. And so as such, Very often the best partnerships, the advisors, the partners can finish each other's sentences. They want the exact same things. They're always on the same page. But very often the exploration process or the decision to stay or go and then where you go can absolutely highlight chasms or gaps between partners. And one of the biggest places is where one partner wants maximum transition money, really prizes the short term, and another partner really prizes the long term. We often see that between older advisors and younger advisors in a multi-generational team. So whatever the goals are, one, it's when we talk to a multi-generational team or a multi-person team, we are very concerned in hearing from each member of the partnership. So I don't mean necessarily sales support, but the advisor members or the stakeholders in the team, the decision makers in the team, we want them not only to either fill out the self-assessment each individually, and then we come together and talk about it, or we talk about it as a whole. One, because it's important for us to hear the answers, but it's equally important that they hear from each other. Lewis and I are counseling a team now. It's a multi-generational team, not a family team. But it's clear because of different ages of the team members that their goals are very different. Their risk tolerances are different. Their the length of time in which it would take to be made whole on what they leave behind is very different. Lots of things are very different. And I don't think that they were even aware of those differences. So these conversations are important. But equally important is how will you reconcile the differences? And what do I mean by that? So let's assume you want to go to Morgan Stanley and you want to be independent, two different partners, right? Well, those are worlds apart. How do we decide? Well, one of a couple of things happen. Either you wind up going to Morgan Stanley and the person who wanted to be independent is willing to be flexible and gives in, or you go independent and the other person is flexible and gives in, or you stay put because you can't find a palatable solution, or you find a middle ground solution. What might that be? In today's environment, firms like Rockefeller and First Republic are good middle ground because they're boutique firms that feel more independent than, say, being at Morgan Stanley, and someone doesn't have to build their own firm from scratch. It could be going to a firm like a Raymond James or a Stifel or an RBC, regional firms that have a lot of the attributes of independence without a lot of the bureaucracy that make the house world. So this is an important one as well.
That's fantastic. I don't know, Louis, did you have something that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that covers it.
Because I got a couple questions myself, if you guys don't mind.
Please.
Let me come in here. You guys talked about assessing the pain points that an advisor feels at their current firm to decide which are the important ones that would prompt a move. I'm wondering how you help them go through this assessment to find the firms that they want to evaluate. And I'll tell you why I ask that, because I imagine every firm, if my pain point as an advisor is our technology is terrible, it doesn't integrate well, and I go out and I look at firms in the channel that I identified and I want to join, I'm sure that all of those firms will tell me our technology is great, integrates perfectly, integrates wonderfully, not a problem. Absolutely, we can solve that pain point for you. How do you help them get past that point?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, one of the only ways to do that is to actually dig in and, in your example, take the technology for a test drive, do demos, see if there's a demo environment that you can play around with, and then assess whether it's better enough. You can also do things like talk to other advisors that are at the firm, whether they came from your predecessor organization or not, and see, okay, like the tech guy is really good at showing the planning software, but in actuality, how does it compare to the planning software from XYZ firm? So really what we've done is we call it the due diligence scorecard. It's a proprietary comparison tool. Anyone who's interested in it, they can certainly reach out and we can discuss it. But it plots, we'll say, the top 6 or 7 objective pieces of criteria on one axis, and it allows each member of a team or an individual advisor to then go and rank on a scale of 1 to 10 how the various firms are looking at stack up. There's also a way to put weightings on it. So maybe for me, technology is 40% of my most desired outcome. So my scorecard is going to have whatever I put in technology is going to be a major driver. But my partner, Joe, who's 72 years old, he cares much more about the transition deal. So maybe he'll put the transition deal is worth 50% of the scoring. So I think the only way to do it is to move past armchair exploration, which is talking to people like us, reading, listening to podcasts, et cetera. And eventually, when you're really ready to dig in, to actually dig in. There's no substitute for conversation and for experiencing it yourself. But then you've got to come back to how do we keep track of everything and how do we objectively evaluate our criteria, which ties back to how are these areas matching up to our answers on the self-assessment. So it all is a very nice little circle where it's the assessment answers drive the solution set that we'd recommend. And then the compare and contrast process through the scorecard ties back to the assessment so that ultimately you can answer the question, have I seen something that's better enough? And is the grass greener? Because if the answer is no, or we can't reach a consensus, then you stay because it's a hassle. Or in the case of multiple partners, we have seen partnerships breaking up or businesses breaking up because one individual really wants one thing and the other isn't willing to give up on it.
So this assessment that advisors would take and rank their priorities, weigh those priorities, creates kind of a map that then can be used to surface firms that might be a good match, and you'll help them do that match those priorities with the strengths of a given firm?
Exactly right. Yeah. So we start with a list of over 300 different firms. So that sounds overwhelming, but obviously there's not 300 firms that are a viable home for someone's business. The point is, it's our job to understand the different options that are out there and then take this very large list and customize it to what someone's looking for based upon our understanding of their business. So I work with $10 million plus clients, or it's 80% commission based, or structured notes is really important, plus their drivers and motivators from the assessment. And then we come to a list. And the strategy of coming up with the list is what Mindy talked about. It's let's look at 5 firms, whatever the advisor's appetite is, or let's start with one RIA platform, launching an RIA directly and another broker-dealer, and then can add best-in-class options based upon what the findings are from the initial round of diligence.
Yeah. And David, just to add to that, on the flip side, we often, I think as we sort of alluded to it earlier, we often hear from advisors when they're 3/4 of the way through the process, they've not been terribly strategic or thoughtful about it. They got calls, a friend of theirs said, hey, I like my manager, why don't you come have lunch with him? Or they get a call from the manager of another broker dealer or a business development officer at an independent firm. And, why not take the meeting? No harm, no foul. Well, the harm in that is it becomes overwhelming because there's no place or way to really objectify the answers. The goal or job, I should say, of every business development officer anywhere is to sell you on their firm. They're not going to tell you what's wrong with it. They're going to tell you what's great about it. And oftentimes you get the same, this is great, or this is better, or this is wonderful, or you should join here from every firm. So the advisor is sort of left saying, well, now what? I don't know. I don't have a mechanism by which to compare and contrast. That's a lot of time where what we will do is say it's time to back up the train. And I don't mean taking days or weeks. I mean, let's take 20 minutes. Let's back up the train for 20 minutes, help you get clarity on what's most important. And all of a sudden, as if a light was turned on in a room, it goes from darkness to light. The right options just become really illuminated.
Makes sense. I do want to remind the audience that we have about 10 minutes left here. So any questions you have, please type them into that Q&A window. They are anonymous. We will not reveal your name or firm, but any question you have about this process, please put it in now, and Mindy and Luis will do the best that they can to answer it. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you, Mindy, to go back a little bit and talk about this. Okay, so you have your weighted list, you got your priorities. What if there is just irreconcilable differences on the part of a team? They know they want to move, they know they have to leave, The pain points are too great, but they just cannot make a decision on the same page about where to go and what move.
Yeah, well, so either they compromise, someone is willing to compromise, or both compromise, or everyone compromises, or as Lewis alluded to, every once in a while you see a team or a set of business owners split up to realize that while we were good together yesterday, or what got us here isn't necessarily the best construct to get us there. And if I'm really dug in and clear that what's best for me and my clients is to be an independent business owner, and you want to be or do something else, or Lewis gave the example where maximum transition money is most important to you, and I'm more about maximizing long-term enterprise value, and I'm willing to sacrifice the upfront, and we can't come to a compromise. And by the way, there are many compromises along the way, many different options that sort of do both or do something in the middle. But if there's no way to find that, then it might be best that the partnership splits up.
Interesting. I do want you to spend a little bit more time on this notion of comparing and contrasting, because I think it's important. Once, say that the team is unified, they know they're going to make a move, they've got their short list of firms that they want to really sit down and engage with. What does the process look like there? How do they move from that short list to a final decision?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, Lewis, I'm going to take that. Yeah,
I'll take it. So every person, every advisor makes decisions in a completely different way. An analogy I'll use is if you're buying a car, do you read consumer reports and pick I got the Kia Sportage that's a 98 and just go with that? You're good. You did some light homework and you're good to go. Or are you the person that has to take 13 cars for a test drive? Every advisor approaches this critical decision in a different way. So for some, it's just trusting the process, that I know I have trust that the folks that I engage to help me through this process know what they're doing, and they put what they thought were 5 of the best options in front of me. And so they trust that, and they'll make a decision based upon those 5 options. Or they may say, you know what, I'm really identifying, I like the idea of starting my own RIA. Let's add other options that kind of fit the bill. And in that way, we'll round out the solution set to match their needs. But really, I think it's taking enough time to be comfortable with all the major things you're trying to solve for. So it's making sure, let's say you're a big financial planner, that you've had time to really evaluate the financial planning software. You've met with the advanced planning group. You've been able to ask questions of the compliance department about whether you can charge for financial planning as a separate fee and how that works. And then I think with any firm, even in a virtual environment, and we saw plenty of fully virtual transitions where people never met, but I think it's critical to try to get out to a firm's home office or do a more extended diligence day where you're present, you're away from the office, you can allocate a couple of hours or even a couple of days to really getting ingrained in their culture. And usually from a meeting like that, an advisor can understand whether this is the firm I want to go to. They may still have questions, and that's normal. And 100% of people don't join after a home office visit, but you should know whether a firm is in or out after that visit. So I think that's a long-winded answer, but I think it's trusting the process or knowing yourself and how you make decisions, and then spending the right amount of time in the right areas, finishing off with a home office visit to really round out the mix.
Yeah. And if I can just add to that, I think probably the most important lens through which, when somebody goes on one of these home office visits, the lens through which you want to approach. So home office visits are about bringing in, the advisor sits in a conference room or the team sits in a conference room, and the broker dealer or the firm brings in a parade of key leaders from different product areas or heads of the firm to meet with the advisor to showcase the firm. But the most important question or lens through which an advisor should experience any home office visit or anyone they meet with from another firm is, how will this firm, this product they're talking about, this solution, this option, allow me to service clients better? That's what it's all about. If a move is not going to allow you to at the very least level the playing field and be able to do what you're currently doing for clients, and if not bettering it, then you probably shouldn't move. Said another way, it's equally important to approach the due diligence process thinking about what would my pitch sound like. So if I move tomorrow to this other firm, this other model, how would I explain this to my clients? And the most important characteristic for a client is what's in it for me. What's the benefit to me of you making this move? It's not about your move because compliance is less onerous and there are less advisors and it'll be easier for you to get business done. But it's important that the advisor is able to connect the dots for why easier for the advisor to get business done translates into better and more efficient service for the client.
Right, less time on the back office, more time with the client. You know, it sounds to me that the process that you guys are talking about is time consuming and a lot of information coming at an advisor when they're thinking about doing this thing. And as you mentioned, they're also running a full-time business serving their clients. How do they keep the information straight? Is there a kind of a calendar track that they go on, or is there some kind of a schedule that you would recommend? How do they keep all this information coming at them straight in their heads while they're still running a full-time job with their clients?
It's definitely hard. It tested an advisor's organizational skills and their ability to synthesize information and cut through the jargon and the salesmanship and get to the real heart of what people are saying. Usually if it's a team of advisors or it's an independent business, even if there's multiple advisors, one individual will be the de facto captain of the transition. They're the ones that are kind of driving the process. Maybe they're the ones that are the most unhappy, the most motivated, but they're also probably the one that's the most organized and has the best ability to communicate with his or her teammates. So usually having one captain of the transition is very helpful. And then it's just taking diligent notes. It's making sure your follow-up questions are answered. That's part of what we do too, is help project manage the entire process. But no matter what we do for an advisor, if they don't have their own organizational process and method for evaluating and analyzing companies, it's going to be a very long and daunting process. And that's where the process really does become overwhelming, because you start asking questions multiple times. Oh, I forgot so-and-so from XYZ firm said this, but I thought it was that. So just being on top of it, just like when you're meeting with a client and they're telling you about their life's goals, you're going to take notes, you're going to organize it, you're going to have the follow-ups. It's really a similar discipline.
So,
I guess we should have. Go ahead, Mindy. Sorry.
Well, Louis, it's probably worth asking and mentioning. So, how onerous is it? How overwhelming is it? How much of a full-time job is it to explore other options?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it could become kind of like a full-time job if you're not careful with how you organize your process. We still think it is time-consuming, so you have to have a base level of motivation to do it. You shouldn't just look around because you thought it was a good idea. You have to do it because you're motivated enough to put in the work and be uncomfortable with new information and the prospect of change. A well-run due diligence process, and we've done it in a week because an advisor has a gun to their head or are terminated. But I would say usually we would say, let's budget 2 to 3 months. It's not every day, but if you give us 2 to 3 months where you're focused on this, we'll work around your schedule. You can have a vacation, but usually in that period of time, we can finish the due diligence process. And then how long it takes after the diligence to actually transition, it's largely dependent upon, is someone going independent for the first time? Do they need new real estate? There's always delays with real estate. If they're filing for an RIA, the SEC has 45 days to approve the new entity. So depending upon the model, it may be quicker or shorter, but usually we'll say minimum 30 days, maximum probably 4 to 5 months from decision to actually transitioning. So it is time consuming, no doubt about it, but it can be time consuming for the right reasons if it's organized and it's strategic. And that's not a plug to work with us, but to work with any professional and to stress, there's one learning from this, stress process over action. Make sure that you're structured, you're strategic, and you're thoughtful, and good results happen.
We got a couple minutes left. We got to wrap this up quick, but Mindy, I did want to get this one question to you because I think it's probably on everyone's mind. Any thoughts about whether compensation or valuation multiples are going to remain as high as they have been given the wobbly market? You mentioned it was a seller's market, a job seeker's market.
Yeah.
Is that set to continue?
Yeah. We don't expect deals to go down. We don't necessarily expect them to go up, but we don't see them going down. And what's keeping them high is because there's more competition than ever before for top talent. And so as long as you're a quality advisor with a growing book of business, most every firm will be very interested, broker-dealer firm will be interested in having you. And in terms of valuation multiples, we don't see that going down either.
Fantastic. Final question, someone's asking how they can get access to the self-assessment.
Perfect. So yeah, we'll send a recap email to anyone who's registered. We'll include the assessment in it, and certainly you can reach out to us. The email, it's right here if you'd like a more detailed version, or if you want to kind of dissect your answers to the assessment and you want to speak with us. Worth mentioning, I saw a question that came up too. We're free of charge to an advisor. We don't charge an advisor for our time. We're paid by a hiring firm, a platform, a broker-dealer, et cetera, if we're instrumental in guiding the process. So no obligation. Everything's confidential as well.
Great to know. That's it. We could talk about this stuff all day, but we're getting the hook. We've run out of our time. Thank you very much, Louis. Thank you very much, Mindy. Very much appreciated. And thank you to the audience. We also want to thank Tiffin Grow for making today's webinar possible. Thank you very much to Tiffin. And note that once you leave this event, a short survey window will pop up. If you answer that survey, it helps us create content that's most useful for you in the future, so we'd appreciate it. And with that, have a productive remainder of the day.
Thanks, David.